And one. The unfortunate reality is that the medical licensing board is necessary only insofar as the bureaucracy of the medical and health service industry is large and needs decisions made outside the realm and responsibility of a doctor and nurse. The problem that this puts forth, however, is one of efficiency and bipartisanship, because doctors and nurses are not trained to be the holders and developers of a bunch of administrative work. They are not trained for being able to make decisions, not just in a hospital, but within the parameters of the entire state. The question that Joseph puts forth is crucial. If they cannot do it the most efficiently, then we have to find someone who can. This is the thing that I think side opposition seems unable to engage with us with. A lot of response is to make sure the core of LO does not make it past their speech. One, on both sides, there will be needs for specialized information. I think Joseph made it clear that it's pretty reasonable that they'll probably also have a vested interest in helping. The debate is not about corruption, but on upskilling, to put the best people at the best possible positions. Doctors are good at helping people on a case-by-case basis. They don't have that experience on a broad scale when you actually have to make policies. I can be very knowledgeable about what problems need solving, but that does not translate into knowing how to actually solve them. Two, you also have to educate nurses and doctors' representatives about administration. And there's far more admin work to be done than medical work, which means the time you spend educating them on your end is probably also comparatively the same or comparatively worse. Civil servants are used to working in environments where they have to suit different needs and know how to consult with people on the ground. It's very simple to understand, right? If doctors are clamoring against unfair standards, then they negotiate those standards. Three, I think. Both nurses and civil servants are appointed. This is symmetric. What isn't is how you are able to call out your wrongdoings when they happen. Doctors in these positions probably don't want to make policies that are necessary but not popular for the medical community. You are less likely to have actual positive change in discourse on their side of the house. Don't worry, that's my extension. I'll get to it. Fourth, the scope of responsibility of a civil servant is to have to do all of this government bureaucracy stuff. The problem with having doctors and nurses having to be staff is every single minute wasted that isn't spent facing a patient and doing what they do best is the point in which they probably are not sufficiently put in that particular role. Lastly, Joseph's POI to LO is quite important because OP desires a sense of urgency, which we agree with, and we think that is more proximately allocated to doing and implementing all of that in the hospital or in the university that they teach in. This debate is just about the extent of staffing in the medical licensing board. Side opposition, to a large extent, overplays their degree of importance and influence in society because you need to pass the university first before taking the exam. Our preparation comes upstream of getting your license. What's the extension? Civil servants are comparatively more neutral and more non-biased. You are more likely to have reform that doctors and nurse practitioners need but not necessarily want. Note that this is going to flip all of LO, I will call it out. Why is this true? The first mechanism is on the counter-incentive and capacity for the board with medical doctors to be biased for their own. That is to say, medical boards by these professionals often become insular and often serve to protect the interests of their own colleagues. This takes in the form of insisting on change to not happen in the instance that they like the person who is going to lose their license, biased priorities in the instance where budget needs to be allocated and resourced, resisting more progressive forms of procedures to be able to keep their chokehold on power. Why is this being comparative? Because opposition is going to say, well, wait, doesn't that happen if it's going to be held by civil servants as well? No, it's not. The delta of change that happens is that civil servants are beholden to democratic processes and checks and balances coming from our own institutions. This is comparatively better for a couple of reasons. A, it solves the problem of latency and stagnancy that is able to happen as a consequence of this medical board being beholden only to the medical community and their wants and interests. B, obviously we aren't just going to assume it's not going to be done without the complete consultation of doctors, but insofar as the administration is concerned, this policy makes it so that the input of doctors only manifests when it is necessarily required. This is probably easier for them, as those who will be consulted are more assured that they are only being talked to as a professional, as a doctor, without any of the political and corporate ties being imposed upon them as a consequence of them being on this board. What are the harms absent this as weighing comparatively to what opposition wants? 1. Favoritism within the board. Note that this is something significantly harder to untangle given that the fetters of democracy is not what happens currently, as the medical board has no capacity to advocate for this change. 2. On our side of the house, you are less likely to have that change in discourse, or sorry, on our side of the house, you are likely to have that change in discourse happen more gradually, which is a marginal change that is not soft-locked by a skew towards bias and technocracy. The second mechanism is on the capacity for change to actually happen and what that change specifically looks like. The board has a responsibility on a lot of administrative shit, e.g. having more rigid call-out mechanisms, stronger anti-discrimination, and like better rural standards for hospitals. Problem: these are inherently something that doctors and professionals do not want to contend to because A, it showcases incompetency and that is bad optics for the industry, but B, doctors inherently do not see this as a part of the job that they signed off for and went to school for. Comparatively though, civil servants have every incentive to cater to the shit that actually needs to be fixed. A, they are more in line with at least putting these issues more towards the center because that is what makes them distinct from a medical practitioner. If they do good, then all of the problems that exist get marginal results. But even if they're like really as incompetent and as malevolent as Op frames them to be, the exclusive thing we provide is an opt-out mechanism for these civil servants and for you to call it out. Note, on our side, you democratize access to the medical board because it's now beholden to the state and therefore can be influenced by its people. On side opposition, you leave it up entirely to technocracy to be inefficient and selfish in their own wants and desires. Why is this comparative? A, the role of a civil servant is a lot more aligned towards the duties of the board. But B, you get call-out mechanisms that do not work on side opposition. I really hope that's clear. What are the impacts? And I want you to listen because these impacts are comparative to this round, not in a vacuum. A, the medical board is a lot more open to be able to adapt, to change, and be more capable of addressing important issues that a doctor might not necessarily agree with. 2, you just get better accountability if that change is going to be bad. Weighing and why is this argument important? Remember, Joseph made this debate clear. It's not a debate about doctors either having full control or having no control. On our side of the house, doctors are more proximate to the very people that they can protect. They can become heads of hospitals in their own individual hospitals. They can be consultants, all of that stuff. The difference and delta is that you don't tie your profession as a doctor to your new reputation as a bureaucratic individuals. That in and of itself is probably something that's worse. For all of those reasons, very, very proud to propose.